institutions, and civil society organizations. Before I go on to introduce the distinguished Honorable Minister to make his substantive presentation, permit me to acknowledge some dignitaries who have joined us this afternoon. We have the Chief Director of the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs, Dr. Ivan Sagridaku, with us. We have the Director of Finance and Administration, Madam Gifty Otem Bosompra. We have the Acting Director, PPBME, Lawyer Kwame Opong Intim. We have the Chief Accountant, Mr. Emmanuel Osei. Head of HR, Madam Justina Bediako. Head of Internal Audit, Mr. Razak Agamwine. And of course, we have the Honorable Member of Parliament for the good people of Swami constituency, who is also the Minister for Parliamentary Affairs and Majority Leader, Honorable Osei Mensah Bonsu. Also with us is my boss, the Honorable Minister for Information and Member of Parliament of Ofuase Ayurebi constituency. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will yield the podium to the Honorable Minister to make his substantive presentation. Honorable Minister.
The Honorable Minister for Information. I guess before I continue, permit me to derobe by taking off my mask. And I can assure those of us here assembled that I have 3 layers of protection. I've taken 2 doses of the AstraZeneca. So I've vaccinated 2 times. And the third, and perhaps the most important layer, is the blood of Jesus that I'm soaked in. So I have 3 layers of protection. And I believe I'm sufficiently and adequately covered. But to begin by apologizing to you, our dear friends, that we've kept you here waiting for a while because I have 3-4 businesses to sort out this morning, including the penultimate one, which I concluded before getting here, the presentation of my ministry's budget, the estimates that is being considered by the relevant committee in Parliament. So we just finished, and I moved from there with my entourage to this place. So, Minister, the Honorable Deputy Minister, staff of the Chief Director and staff of the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs, and our distinguished friends and colleagues from the media. My task today is to present to you the affairs of the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs, and I intend to make it very snappy. I guess some people whose names I will not mention would ascribe to me some features of him being overly loquacious, but I resist that temptation today to be as snappy as I can. Now, First, the vision and mission of the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs includes to position as an accountable, client-sensitive institution within an enhanced participatory and representative democracy. Now, to facilitate, the mission of the ministry is to facilitate, coordinate, monitor, and evaluate strategies for the smooth execution of government business in Parliament that ultimately should guarantee good governance and sustainable national development through dialogue and consensus building. The ministry is mandated in that regard to facilitate, coordinate, monitor, and evaluate strategies which, as I said, will build consensus for the execution of government business in Parliament through the deployment of skilled human resources and modern technology. We support the development of citizen-centered interface with other state and non-state actors in the formulation and implementation of public policies and programs. Third, we monitor and evaluate the implementation of government policies and provide feedback to Cabinet and Parliament. We endeavor to enhance the interface between the executive and the legislature. We support the participation of civil society organizations, including the media and political parties, in policy-making process. We support the improvement of the working relationship between members of Parliament and the metropolitan, municipal, and district chief executive so as to avoid conflict. And of course, if we have a conflict-free environment, the road is cleared for the implementation of development programs and policies. We provide a platform for the independent governance institutions and implementation processes to share experiences and harvest ideas on effective and efficient delivery of their functions. The ministry undertakes such research as may be necessary to enhance the collaboration between Parliament, the executive, and civil society organizations. My presentation today is going to be built around three major stories as highlighted below. First is working dialogues with Parliament, and two, engagement with civil society organizations, including political parties and the media, and working interactions with independent governance institutions. The ministry had working dialogues with the core leadership of Parliament and the expanded leadership of Parliament. The ministry engaged the core leadership of Parliament on the following thematic areas: Parliament and the sustenance of Ghana's democracy, nurturing career legislators in Ghana, prospects and challenges, building consensus and trust in Parliament to enhance both procedural and substantive democracy. 4, Parliament and the sustenance of Ghana's democracy in 2020 and beyond. The ministry engaged the core leadership of Parliament on these themes: Parliament and the sustenance of Ghana's democracy in 2020 and beyond, and nurturing career legislators in Parliament, prospects and challenges, respectively. The interactions succeeded in 1, examining the responsibility of the leadership of Parliament in sustaining Ghana's democracy, especially in an election year and beyond. And we also did interrogation, execution of core and auxiliary functions of Parliament in sustaining Ghana's democracy. And we engaged in fostering effective collaboration between the core leadership of Parliament and the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs for the sustenance of democratic political systems. The second working dialogue with the core leadership of Parliament focused on the nature, causes, and consequences of the high attrition among parliamentarians. We discussed the prospects and challenges of nurturing career legislators, and we offered recommendations to address the high attrition rate in Parliament, and strengthen the relationship between Parliament and the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs to add value to the quality of governance in Ghana. The ministry had a working dialogue with the core leadership of Parliament on the theme Building Consensus and Trust in Parliament to enhance both procedural and substantive democracy. The program succeeded in, I'm talking about the outcomes. 1, examining the measures needed to build and deepen consensus and trust in Parliament. And participants were informed about the need to support the enhancement of capacity of Parliament to exercise its oversight function through building consensus and trust. Measures such as the election of the right caliber of people, assigning roles and responsibilities, engaging members of Parliament in bipartisan discussions, and building an elite consensus on issues of national interest. Indeed, some of the recommendations offered to enhance the performance of Parliament. The program identified and discussed the following mechanisms to sustain public trust, confidence, and interest in the work of Parliament. 1, the reliability of Parliament in the execution of its core mandate. If Parliament must be positioned to perform its own responsibilities and functions, Parliament must be responsive to issues of public interest. Parliament must be open and inclusive in its deliberations, and it has to have integrity in dealing with members of Parliament. And Parliament must have fairness in handling issues of national interest. And Parliament must also demonstrate transparency and accountability in the handling of the affairs of the nation. Parliament requires of the institutions and arms of government that is charged to oversee to demonstrate transparency and accountability. And if we seek equity, we must go to equity with clean hands. So Parliament itself must be transparent and accountable. The working dialogue with Parliament, the third component, was nurturing the relationship between the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs and Parliament and issues that came out. The enhancement of the working relationship between the Ministry of Parliament, the Ministry and Parliament is critical to the identification and execution of programs and activities that promote democratic governance. Second, the holding of such a dialogue offered Parliament and Ministry the opportunity to identify common areas of interest, such as 1, the high attrition rate among members of Parliament, and the growing monetization of politics and their impact on Parliament and the quality of governance. We do know that Parliament, by our functions, not only deliberate matters, but through our deliberation, we inform the generality of our citizenry about matters that are germane to the development of this country. Now, if members of Parliament who engage in these deliberations don't enrich their discourse, their deliberations with research, and just speak from the top of their heads, then we misinform the public. And that means that the quality and competence of members of Parliament themselves should be beyond reproach. Now, these working dialogues produce certain outcomes. So the following recommendations were proffered by participants who engaged in the dialogue sessions. 1 was a proposal that the new standing orders of Parliament should create room for chairpersons of parliamentary committees to be shared among eligible members of Parliament solely on merit, or perhaps that we should share the leadership of the committees amongst the various political parties instead of current arrangement where the majority party would assume headship of all the committees in Parliament. Why is this necessary? It's necessary because the ruling party would have, because of the imperatives of the Constitution, would have to surrender some of the core members of Parliament to the executive, to the president, to be made ministers and deputy ministers. That then will leave some members of the ruling party in Parliament. Don't forget, ordinarily, the president will want to go for the best in Parliament to make them ministers and deputy ministers. So who remains in Parliament to serve as leaders and chairs of the committees? You are laughing, but I haven't said anything. So if you don't have a situation where the leadership of the committees are strong, you have a problem. And I keep saying that every parliament is as strong as its leaders or as strong as its committees make it. If the committees are not strong, parliament will be rendered, excuse my language, lame and limp. Which is why it's important to look at the composition of the leadership. Currently, there are only two committees that are headed by opposition members. One is Public Accounts Committee, and the second is the Subsidiary Legislation Committee. Even the headship of the Subsidiary Legislation Committee is not by statute. It's not prescribed by statute. It's by convention and practice. So we need to have a look at that. It is not for nothing that if you are talking about strong committees in Parliament, one of the committees that will come to mind is the Public Accounts Committee. Why is it so? Basically because it is headed by an opposition party. Let's not kid ourselves. A ruling party is elected into office to ensure that its programs and policies are carried through. We don't want a committee chair to frustrate the government. So, chairs of committees who come from the same party as the ruling administration usually would tread cautiously in dealing with matters that come from the government. And don't forget, the prayer of members of parliament, all of them, is to be made, to have the opportunity to be made a minister or deputy minister. We don't want to cross the path of the president, just so that you may not be blacklisted, so that when your time is due to be made a deputy minister or a minister, reference will not be made to your past, that at a point in time in your life, you were frustrating government business. So people will want to tread cautiously. That's a fact of life. And it's not a now situation. It was a situation yesterday. It was a situation the day before yesterday. So we're talking about proposing new standing orders that would strengthen the committee systems in Parliament. And also, one other matter that came up strongly was the need for constitutional review to decouple the legislature from the executive. The Constitution obligates the president to appoint a majority of ministers from Parliament. It's been like that since 1993. It has its own antecedents, because we all do recollect, those of us who are maybe 50, 60 years, you recollect that on December 31st, 1981, the coup that swept away Liman's administration was occasioned in the main by the disagreement among the ruling party members themselves. At the time, we had strict separation of powers. Liman had all his ministers from outside Parliament. And the members of Parliament, many of them thought that the ministers who had come on board were not involved in the fighting that occurred in the trenches. They fought for victory. And when victory came, the president brought people from outside who were not involved in fighting for the party to win the general and presidential elections and made them ministers. And they went to the ministers to discuss issues. They had to wait sometimes 3-4 hours. The minister would not see them. So the budget of the demand came to Parliament. And the ruling party members were at the forefront to reject the budget out of petty jealousies and covetousness. And learning from that experience and to have harmony, a very smooth, harmonious working relationship between the party in Parliament and the ruling administration. Then we had this inserted into the Constitution, this hybrid. That is what occasioned it. I must say that this arrangement has stabilized the shape of state for some time, 28, 29 years into the Fourth Republic. Don't forget, the Second Republic lasted for just less than 2.5 years. And the Third Republic as well, 2 years, 4 months. This is the longest lasting republic Ghana has seen since independence. So it stabilized the ship of state. But where we are, is it serving the purpose? The majority of the participants felt that we've gotten to a stage that we should terminate this marriage that's yielded the hybrid system that we have. So they're calling for a constitutional review to decouple the legislature from the executive. And committees and MPs should be allowed to operate independently from party control and interference. We are witnessing situations when these days, increasingly, Parliament is discussing matters and party executives, national party executives, come to the public gallery and they are looking down at the performance and the conduct of their members and breathing heavily on their shoulders and indicating to them that the party is supreme. When indeed they should be discussing matters dispassionately and with a degree of patriotism. They are not being liberated by the parties to do what they consider to be very objective, but to submit to the rule of the party. And that can be very dangerous to a democracy that we are cultivating and nurturing. Now, the fiscal impact analysis of legislative proposals must be vigorously done as they are crucial for the successful implementation of same. Whenever any bill, any agreement comes to Parliament, it must be subjected to fiscal impact analysis. What is going to be the effect of this agreement, a loan agreement or a law, on this nation as far as implementation is concerned? What is going to be the effect on the economy, short term, medium term, and long term? The fiscal impact analysis should be done. And it should be part of the conversation in Parliament. But it's never done. And so the sessions came out with these recommendations that Parliament should live up to its responsibility. The Public Affairs Directorate of Parliament, as well as the Parliamentary Press Corps, ought to be strengthened to improve the public understanding of functions of Parliament to engender trust and confidence. Oftentimes, the general citizenry, many of our compatriots, don't clearly understand and they are not able to distinguish between the responsibilities of Parliament and indeed parliamentarians from that of the executive. So, maybe there's filth piling up somewhere in a constituency, and all you hear is somebody going to a radio station or call into a radio station to say that the member of Parliament is not living up to his billing as a member of Parliament because a road has not been done, because filth has piled up, because there's water leakages. What's the role of the Assembly? And we're saying the Public Affairs Directorate and the Parliamentary Press Corps ought to provide further illumination on this. Members of Parliament must be conversant with their conditions of service, including their allowances, facilities, gratuities, and other privileges, so that they can speak on them with sincerity. Oftentimes, when members of Parliament are cornered, what is your emoluments, your conditions of service? They can't speak to it. because they don't know. And even when they know, they retreat. They don't want to talk about that because people seem to think that members of parliament are so much showered with the blessings of this country that the MPs think they will be alienating themselves from the general citizenry. So he doesn't even want to talk about that. The question is, whoever is engaged in any employment who does not know his terms and conditions of engagement at the very outset, members of parliament don't know that. We exist at the behest of the president establishing the committee under Article 71. And oftentimes, as you do know, the committee is not established on time. In fact, 1 year into the administration of the second stanza of President Akufo-Addo, the committee has not been established. And it's not deliberate. The president don't do that because they deal with the establishment of salaries. And presidents are sensitive to the concerns of the general citizens. You don't want on day one after you've been sworn in to establish as a committee. Because if you do, people may think that this president is looking after his own interests. So 1 week into his administration, he has established this committee to establish his emoluments. So being sensitive, they will not do that. They wait for some time. And when they do wait, and they finish with the recommendations come to parliament, maybe oftentimes in the final year of that parliament's life. Sometimes 3-4 months before their term ends. And then they are entitled to some back pay. And people are wondering. People don't understand. And the recommendation from the dialogue sessions was that these things should be done early in the life of Parliament. The ministry is engaged in expanded leadership of Parliament on the committee systems of Parliament. And the meeting offered a diagnostic analysis of the committee system of Parliament and identified innovative ways of enhancing their capacity to deliver on their core mandate. And interactions achieved the following objectives. They examined the institutional framework and its effect on the committees of Parliament. They discussed the nature of the relationship between the committees and the parent house, that is Parliament itself. And they evaluated the performance of the committees of Parliament and identified and discussed the institutional and operational challenges of the committees of Parliament and interrogated the relationship between political parties and their parliamentarians on various committees and offered recommendations to revitalize the performance of committees of Parliament. And in keeping with good governance objective, the ministry facilitated an interface between the expanded leadership of Parliament and the National Media Commission on the following measures that could be instituted to rejuvenate the National Media Commission and how to strengthen the relationship between Parliament and the National Media Commission. The following recommendations were proffered to revitalize the National Media Commission. 1, to review the National Media Commission Act to enable the Commission to execute its mandate effectively and efficiently. Just yesterday, we were having some conversation on this. The other commissions so established have the chief executives of the commissions serving on the board of those commissions. It is only the National Media Commission where the chief executive of that commission is not a member of the board of the National Media Commission. And I was telling them that maybe is attributable to the construct of the National Media Commission. When we look at the establishment of other independent governance institutions, SHRAG, NCC, Electoral Commission, the chapters on them first establish them. The first provision would establish them. When you go to the National Media Commission, they are in the belly of freedom of the media. And they sit somewhere at the periphery of that chapter, which is not good for the National Media Commission. So we came to the conclusion that we must review the National Media Commission Act. Unfortunately, you see, whereas the establishment of the Media Commission itself by the Constitution is an entrenched provision, the membership of the Commission is not an entrenched provision. So perhaps we could have Parliament to have a second look to amend that that section that deals with the membership, and indeed subsequently the constitution and composition of the board of the National Media Commission. Recommendation number 2, accelerates the enactment of laws affecting the content delivery across platforms, including the passage of the broadcasting law. We all do know what is happening in the country. Today, any person with a microphone before that person, calling himself a broadcast journalist, can say anything that he likes. And he thinks that if he's brave enough, he can even dare to insult the president, insult anybody, and get away with it. The National Media Commission is not provided with a muzzle to deal with this, because theirs is only to mediate and settle the cases. They are not provided with the powers to prosecute people who offend the law. And sometimes you have such broadcasters who really cross the red line, and the media house will rally behind that person to support him. What can the Media Commission do in such instances? So we should really, as a nation, be thinking through, because if you are not careful, it will take one errant journalist to set this nation on fire the way we are going. If there's nothing to restrain anybody who has a mic before him calling himself a journalist, this nation could easily be set on fire. So we should be talking to ourselves, and this is the efforts that the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs want to lead, to bring thoughts together in giving a new shape, a new construct to our Constitution. The National Media Commission is pleading for us to enact new laws on complaint settlements, and also to enact new laws on fairness doctrine for the state media. Ladies and gentlemen, the ministry engaged civil society organizations on the following thematic areas: economic revitalization and COVID-19 pandemic, the CASO's perspective, and economic revitalization amid COVID-19 pandemic, the media's agenda, civil society organizations, and democratic elections in Ghana. The ministry organized a dialogue with civil society organizations on the theme economic revitalization amid COVID-19 pandemic, the CASO's perspective. The dialogue was important because of the following objectives. Because it recognized civil society organizations' involvement in national response to COVID-19 pandemic and identified opportunities emerging from the crisis and the lessons learned. The main issues learned and indeed identified by participants were as follows: the non-indigenization of the economy. If your economy is not sufficiently indigenized, in the event of any crisis, investors will flee and indeed bolt with their investment, their money. What becomes of us? Is the reason why there is a strong advocacy, thanks but no thanks to the COVID-19, that we must reposition Ghanaians in the affairs of the economy. So Ghanaian, hey, this is difficult too. Ghanaianing or Ghanaianization of the economy. Nigerians will say Ghanaians. And sometimes when you need to smith these words, they become a bit muffled. We must reposition Ghanaians in strategic areas in the economy. Otherwise, as the COVID has exposed us, we'll be rendered naked in the event of crisis. It also identified inadequate support for businesses created during and after the emergence of COVID-19. And these were exercises that were done in 2020 and 2021. One of the key matters that emerged was the non-payment of taxes by some professional bodies in Ghana. That is the third observation. And low levels of internal revenue mobilization. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are bemoaning the fact that there is high public debt stock, and that we need to look inwards and mobilize revenue to develop our country. Because nobody will develop this country for us than Ghanaians themselves. And this observation came from the engagement that we had with civil society organizations in the year 2020. The emphasis was, the observation was on the low levels of internal revenue mobilization, and that we should increase and expand revenue mobilization in the country. It is surprising. Subsequent to this, that government now steps forward to say that, look, the cost of borrowing has escalated, no thanks to COVID, and the fact also that our debt to GDP ratio has escalated, again, no thanks to COVID. So we must look inwards to mobilize resources from the country to develop, to build our roads, to build clinics, health facilities, to build educational facilities, to deliver potable water. And one of the ways to do this is by the introduction of e-levy. And people say, no, we will not allow you to borrow outside. We will not allow you to also raise revenue from inside this country. So where are we going? Do you want development or we don't want development? Do we want our roads to be built or not to be built? I keep saying, the cost of road construction and road maintenance has escalated over the past 20 years. Why? Because over the past 20 years, just 20 years, the road network of this country has doubled. When President Kufuor took over the administration of this country, the total road network in this country was 39,000 kilometers. When President Kufuor was leaving the scene, the road network had almost doubled. From 39,000, that increased to 69,000 over 8 years. There were roads in the countryside that were not part of the national road network. Kufuor, it was who brought all of them into one basket. So feeder roads was enriched, and we had huge number of kilometerage added to our feeder roads. It's how come the road network increased from 39,000 to 69,000. The NDC assumed the reins of power. They added on to that. From 69,000, it went to 73,000, an increase of 4,000 additional kilometers. Akufo-Addo's first 4 years, increased from 73,000 to 78,000 kilometers. So over just 2 decades, from year 2000 to 2021, the road network has increased more than 100%. We need to maintain them. We need to service them. We need to build new roads. So from independence up to 2000, we had only 39,000. Just 20 years after, it's doubled, more than doubled, to, as we speak today, 79,000 kilometers. We need to maintain them. Where do you have the money to do the maintenance? If we don't mobilize resources from within. Today, as we speak, local contractors, road contractors, the government is indebted to them to the tune of about 4.5, 4.6 billion Ghana cedis. We're not having money to pay them. The e-levy, we are told, in fact, the road fund contributes something. That's not much. The road tolls, yielding altogether about 72 million a year. What is it going to do? In the meantime, that section of the road where you have the road tolls, often because they stop there, the road ends up being warped and furrowed. So you have ridges and furrows at that place. So every year you have to maintain those portions of the road. It's the 78 million that you collect that you are going to use. Some you are going to use to even maintain those sections of the road. How much is left? The e-levy, we are told, is going to yield about 8 billion as opposed to 78 million. What's all your coin at the end of the day? 78 million or 8 billion. That will yield enough for us to be able to do the roads. Of course, I do know that it's not everything that is going to be used for the construction of roads. But if you have 8 billion, 9 billion from the e-levy, it's going to be substantial for you to be able to engage in development programs and projects. So, the dialogue sessions indicated to us that we need to do this. And you know what? They were saying that we have so many markets in the country. Those markets are not paying the relevant or the requisite levies. And they were saying that we should involve the queen mothers, the various market queens, to be able to identify the traders who will pay the requisite levies to assist in the development not only of the markets, but also the communities where the markets are situated. The participants made the following recommendations during dialogues. The economy should be indigenized. There should be support systems for businesses created during and after the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic. Professional bodies should be encouraged to pay taxes, and there ought to be a rigorous effort at increasing internal revenues in order to increase revenue levels and reduce the nation's dependence on loans and foreign handouts. I just said that our debt to GDP is ballooning. It's ballooning because before the COVID, we're expanding our economy in the region of our 10% on yearly basis, or of 7% on yearly basis. No thanks to COVID. You now can't even grow by 1%. You grew at 0.4%, right? And yet, expenditures were not at the level that we projected. Expenditures escalated. What does it mean? It means that whereas your nominator was increasing, your denominator was shrinking. It is the reason why your debt to GDP is ballooning. So not until you are able to increase your base, the denominator, if the cost escalates, and commensurately, the denominator, the revenue does not improve, your debt to GDP will keep ballooning. So, distinguished colleagues, we need to appreciate this, that government must have sufficient revenue to be able to develop the nation the way we all envisage that the nation must develop. The ministry had a dialogue with other senior media professionals to examine the context within which presidential and parliamentary elections should be conducted in order to offer some strictures on how Ghana could consolidate her democracy. The working interactions achieved the following objectives. One, we examined the context within which presidential and parliamentary elections should be conducted, and it analyzed the media's stake in the conduct of free, fair, and transparent elections. We reviewed the growing challenges confronting the media in performing their democracy-enhancing roles, and we consolidated the relationship between the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs and the media to deepen democratic governance. I've already spoken to you about what we did, economic revitalization amid COVID-19 pandemic, the media's agenda. And in that regard, the following objectives were achieved. We reaffirmed the media's stake in the rejuvenation of Ghana's economy. The media primarily should be concerned with the development, stability, and the integrity of this country. Our focus should be, you want freedom of speech, freedom of the media. What should it translate to? At the end of the day, it should relate, as I keep saying, and I keep repeating always, it should relate to the protection and preservation of the fundamental human rights, freedoms, unity, and stability for our nation, the development and stability for our nation. That is the responsibility of the media. It is not just talking and critiquing and criticizing without any vision. The vision for all of us should be how to develop our country in unity. We are a diverse people, yes, but the diversity should yield to unity and stability of our nation. It should not be, as somebody is saying, that I'm calling for a national insurrection against the government. The soldiers should not sit down. Where is this coming from? We should please have a clear vision for the sustenance of the democracy that we have as a nation. So the media should be concerned ultimately about the rejuvenation of Ghana's economy. We interrogated the major economic policies and programs instituted by government aimed at revitalizing the economy of Ghana. We offered a platform for the harvesting of ideas towards the rejuvenation of Ghana's economy, nurtured the relationship between the ministry and the media to enhance democratic governance. The forum came with some recommendations. One was that Parliament must endeavor to support the operations of Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, GBC. Are there any representatives of GBC here? You have representatives here. Thank you very much. You are doing very well. But you must also be transparent and accountable. We want Parliament to assist. We want Parliament to have the government to continue to resource you as the number one broadcaster for this nation. And we do appreciate what you do. But if you have situations where, in an election year, political parties are required to pay so much to advertise. We advertise in the private media. We pay. And when we advertise with GBC, radio, television, those parties must pay. And when after the elections, we want to look at the records of payment of those parties and you can't find them, that's a challenge. So you must also be transparent and accountable. If I should speak for you, I should speak to your records. If I records, then you make my work difficult. True or false? GBC, true or false? True. Say so. Let other people hear you. You don't want to talk. So that's where we are. We want transparency and accountability in our national life. That transparency and accountability should not be limited to the political players, not only to members of parliament, not to ministers, not to the Speaker of Parliament, not to the President, not only to the judiciary. All other public servants, you exist to provide service for the public, and you must be transparent and accountable. So public institutions are required to be accountable as well. The ministry engaged political parties on the theme, monetization of politics in Ghana, a focus on solutions. The program was held to identify and discuss measures that could be instituted to address the excessive monetization of our politics. The dialogue carried out an introspection of the effects of monetization on the quality of governance in Ghana. We examined the growing contribution of political parties to monetization and evaluated strategies that can be adopted to curb monetization in politics. And the ministry, by that engagement, had that collaboration with political parties to improve upon the quality of democracy. The recommendations that ensued from that session in order to curb the level of monetization of politics are as follows. That we should review the Constitution, that is the 1992 Republican Constitution, to make political parties and the electorate more responsive. 2, we must reform the political parties law in order for them to be much more open and transparent and accountable. The political parties should let us know where they are getting their monies from. They don't want to talk about that. We have all manner of people contributing, and yet the political party law proscribes any non-Ghanaian from contributing. When the law was made, 5 million. 5 million today is 50 cities, right? Yeah. Or is it 500 cities? 500 cities. It's 500 cities. What it means is that nobody, no non-Ghanaian can contribute more than 500 Ghana cities to a political party. And yet we know what happens behind the curtains. If we want to be realistic, we must review the political parties law. Then we must also review the assets declaration law. Political activists, public servants are required to declare their assets every 4 years. Right? When you declare your assets, you then take it to the Auditor General. What is the Auditor General supposed to do with it? He seals it, then he deposits it somewhere. Maybe when somebody enters into a litigation with you and you have a court case, the matter could be interrogated. Other than that, nobody raises an issue about that. But why is it that when you declare your assets, the Constitution provides that you should lodge it with the Auditor General? It is so because the Auditor General must look at it, audit it. So if within 4 years you have built 4 houses, the Auditor General then will call you into question. Where did you get the money from to build the 4 houses? And if you had good money, did you pay your taxes? Is the responsibility of the Auditor General. But however it came to be structured in our Constitution, the Constitution is silent on it. It just says that deposit with the Auditor General. And the Auditor General, as if he is your watchman, you just deposit it with him and he keeps it till the kingdom come. That's not supposed to be the arrangement. He is supposed to open your declared assets. The other day I heard somebody say that, as the last count, he had about 100 houses. I say, hey, and why are they? 100 houses, no. Property rate being in the established democracies, if you have a house located anywhere, you pay property rate. The property rate is calculated, one, the location of the property, the provision of utilities, water, electricity, telephone services, and the prime location of that facility. And finally, the cost, the evaluated cost of that property. These 6 factors determine the rate that you pay to the council. Accra, Kumasi, Sekondi Takoradi, Tamale, these metropolitan areas, they don't require government support to stay alive. If they were diligent in raking in property rates, they will not require to rely on common fund. And the common fund should go to support the stressed distress. Like Lambusier. Should I add Swami? I mean, we know the districts that are distressed. They should go to support them, not the endowed districts. But go to Land Valuation Board and go and look at the property, the cost of the assigned rates of the property in Accra. You'll be surprised to realize that mansions in Accra, the rate that is assigned to maybe that property will be about maybe 50,000, 100,000. So at the end of the day, the district assembly can only go and request that in that regard, pay property rate of 200 Ghana cedis on that property. Whereas if it is properly evaluated, that one property, because it's usually a percentage of the combined effect of these factors that I've alluded to. So that property perhaps should be attracting maybe about 100,000 Ghana cedis for a year because of its location, because of its value. And yet that property is assigned a rate of 400 cedis. If we did that, Bill Gates. Why is Bill Gates not building 200 houses in America? Because of property rates. So we should do this. There should be proper assets declaration. And as for those of them engaged in the monetization of politics, there should be proper sanctions. There must be a state funding of political parties with clearly defined modalities for its implementation, strengthen the internal political parties mechanisms, the need for consistent public education on the ill effects of monetization of politics on national development, and the mandate of the Electoral Commission must be reviewed, and a different institution established to be solely responsible for the regulation of political parties. The EC charged with the conduct of elections. But the regulation of political parties is something that has become difficult for the Electoral Commission. Perhaps the time has come to assign another institution with that responsibility. The law provides that if you don't exist in 2/3 of the districts in this country, you don't have to be registered as a political party. The Electoral Commission, without recourse to this provision in the Constitution, would usually give them a provisional certificate when they don't exist in 2/3 of the districts. We should be religious about that. And once you are able to do this, the multiplicity of political parties that we have in the system, I think we have more than 32 or so registered political parties in this country. And yet we know that in terms of ideology, there can only be 2 political parties. There can only be 2 political parties. You either belong to the left or you belong to the right. The directive principles of state policy, which has defined the broad goal of development for us as a nation, compels all political parties to belong to the center. So in spite of ourselves, I belong to the MPP, in spite of ourselves, we are just a liberal party, a rightist liberal party. So we belong just a little bit to the right of the center. The NDC, in spite of themselves, also belong to just a little bit to the left of the center. We are all centrist parties. And it's the reason why a liberal party like the MPP that introduced school feeding, that introduced health insurance, which otherwise should be the remit of a social democratic party, not a liberal democratic party. But it is because of the imperatives of the Constitution, which is forcing us to do this. So, ladies and gentlemen, we should do what is right for this nation. And I think if we did, we'll be growing up together as a nation in leaps and bounds. The ministry organized a day's workshop for the National Commission for Civic Education, the Electoral Commission, the Media Commission, and the Commission for Human Rights and Administrative Justice. And the theme for the program was Independent Governance Institutions and Election 2020 in Ghana, some reflections. And we discussed 4 topics. 1, securing free and responsible regulatory environment for the media processes towards 2020 elections. Strengthening the institutional capacity of the NCC to deliver voter education towards the 2020 elections. So these, we are talking about what happened in year 2020. Revisiting the human rights dimensions of democratic elections in Ghana, lessons from the 2020 elections, towards an effective electoral management in Ghana, the 2020 elections in perspective. The program was useful as one examined the various factors impinging on the credibility of the electoral process, reviewing the capacity of the NCC for the conduct of voter education, interrogated the regulatory framework to guide the conduct of the media practitioners, discussed the human rights dimensions of democratic elections in Ghana. The ministry is positioned to support Ghana's transformation above everything else, to deepening democratic governance, to harmonizing relationship between Parliament and the Executive, supporting the capacity-building efforts of Parliament, enhancing the ability of the leader of government business to execute his or her functions, and supporting the independent governance institutions to function optimally, and encouraging the participation of civil society organizations in the formulation and implementation of public policies and programs. And we do this now. Hitherto, when government comes with their own programs, they go to Parliament. Civil society has little contribution towards. So what we do these days is to lift the programs and policies in their formative days, bring them up to engage civil society for their participation. Indeed, again, if you look at the Constitution provides for the Council of State, for instance, to advise the President on bills that go to Parliament, which the President, perhaps, after its passage by Parliament, would not want to assent to, but refer to the Council of State for advice. Now, if the Council of State is not following what Parliament is doing, and it goes to them, and they are required to proffer advice to the President, what advice would they give to the President on that? They will not proffer any useful advice. So what I've done is to engage the Council of State such that any bill that comes to Parliament, we submit copies to them, and sometimes I have some discussions with them on the memorandum, that is the object, the principles and policies behind that bill, and then they also follow Parliament, what Parliament is doing, and they're able then to know what is right, what is wrong with this bill. So that if, after its passage, it goes to the President refers it to them, having followed the deliberations in Parliament, they will have appreciated what Parliament did, and if there should be any filling in, you'll be better placed to do what the Constitution requires of them. And so we're enhancing governance. And the civil society organizations, we found a way to also let them have copies of such programs for them to deliberate on, and then they will touch base with Parliament and also with the ministry, and then we synthesize the ideas from civil society organizations and then factor them into the formulation, indeed the crafting of the bills in Parliament. So, ladies and gentlemen, the ministry generally promotes consensus around the fundamental issues of development through the shaping of public policies in order to secure for ourselves and posterity the blessings of liberty, equality of opportunity, and prosperity as captured in the preamble of the 1992 Republican Constitution. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for indulging me.
Honorable Minister, thank you for the brilliant and insightful presentation. In fact, I had prepared a summary, but trust me, it was so beautiful that the presentation need not be touched. But for the purpose of the non-English speaking stations, I would like to give a minute summary in 3 so that you would appreciate all that the Honorable Minister said today. Mr. Minuanum Central for say ensema Honorable Kyei Mensah Bonsu onona abanyaso ehwe emrahye bedwam nkita hodie so ode abeto yanim awie no ene se enama namo ne adwuma pa asoye ni tu no wahu se yebekyekyere oman ne yebetum pon na kabima mikabiamamu na ebekoso a enye atesem anase enye adwenkyere ene yede bekyekyere oman na emom ebehia se obeye mpensempense mu no adi nkita ho ahodo a ebeboa amanindifo ne amanyofo central for ne mpanyifo ahodo ekeka ho enso so di omunimde ebeba ne aka ne nyina bom na omode aye ntotoye ebeboa ama oman na tumpon na ne titiru ne se asoye no ene mrahye bedwafo dom kese ne dom kuma no mpanyimfo oda no nyina nsentrofo ankrankre ahodo nipa ahodo bebre adi nkita ho ama omo nso so akye se yepese kabima minka biamamu ene nkita ho eda aban ne mrahye bedwa adwuma no bekọ anima omode ensem ba akomienu bi ato anim se etimi tu saa na mo no ne yefa saa kwan no so a ebeboa ni titiru ene se ye Ghana mrapon 1992 constitution no esese ohwe ne ye nsachae bi wum afi nso so standing orders Parliament of Ghana omudidi dwuma ne no so sachae wum na afi nso public First Directorate any press corps or Parliament no say omo dwumadi omo hyemu na afi nso so mra de cheche National Media Commission no eno say nsachae wum ebio mra ema kwan ma obi timifa microphone anase ofa phone ana BBC nanim na okase o mi twamfonyin na me nso me de abeto abonte ama amansan hwebi no yetimi chechere samra num ne titiro ne broadcasting law afi ne betwa me apase no na bio nso so ankrankra nso oni omudi nkita ho enso so de adwenkyere ebeboa ma COVID-19 yare ya besen yekomu kwa na ebeboa na Ghana man sikasem ntotoye yetimi ahyemokena na bio se ebeboa na emra de chechere amanyoku ahodoɔ yɛde yɛ amanyɔsɛm wɔ Ghana ha ɛbɛboa na ɔmatumi ayɛ nsakyerɛeɛ a ɛma sika bebree a yɛtutu gu abɔnten so as again sɛ yɛbɛboa na ntotoyɛ pa ne nkurɔfoɔ a ɔmu nimde ɛwɔ amanyɔsɛm mu ɔmbɛtumi abam na ne nyinaa nkɔyɛ sika ɛno nso so yɛbɛtumi ahyehyɛ ho mmara yie. Na afei nso so ɛyɛ ɔmo ɔmagye penee sɛ ɔmbɛsom aban as ebia ɛyɛ obi wɔ hɔ yɛ mmarahyɛbadwani obi wɔ hɔ nso so a ɔda ekuo bi ano anaasɛ ɔyɛ minister anaa deputy ɛsɛ sɛ mmara a yɛfrɛ na asɛ declaration a ɛboa ma asɛ bi ɔmo agyapadeɛ ne ɔmo ahonya ne ho ntotoyɛ nyinaa ɔmo de bɛto abɔnten anaasɛ ɔmo de bɛba aban mu na akɔ krataa mu na ɔmatumi abu ho akonta no ɛno nso so waka ho asɛm sɛ ɛsɛ sɛ saa mmara no nso so ɛho nhyehyɛeɛ yɛde ɛyɛ adwuma na nyame adom a aboa ma yɛatumi akyekyere ɔman no yie ɛne nsɛm bebree kwa ɛna honorable minister ɛde abɛdan yɛ awie yi enti yɛbɛda honorable minister ase ɛne naso yɛyɛ ne adwuma pa ɔmo yɛde boa Ghana man. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, we will take 2 sets of questions. Because of time, we can take 5 questions for a start and then go to the Honorable Minister for his responses, and we'll come back for your follow-up questions if there are any, and then call it a day. So if you have a question, kindly show by hand. We'll bring the microphone to you. You mention your name and media house and proceed to ask your question. So we'll take the first one from him one and then take one from here.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Kweku Asante from Joy News. The Honorable Minister mentioned the e-levy and some of the concerns that have been generated. The Finance Minister spoke a while ago, some time back, and said that negotiation was ongoing between both sides in Parliament to reach a certain agreement. Since the House is inching closer to horizon, I want to know if there's been any agreement. And the minority have also been raising concerns about their motion for rescission. They've said that they are going to move it again when the substantive speaker arrives. We know he's back in town. I just wanted to know if he has any information on that, and if that is hampering the current negotiations and the sittings of the committees of Parliament on the estimates. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll take the second question from this one.
Thank you. My name is Mensah from Ghana News Agency. My first question is with regards to parliamentarian burden, dialogue, and consensus. And I think over the period, we have witnessed some melee in Parliament, especially during the swearing-in of the president, before the swearing of the president, what happened on the floor of Parliament, and even recently, the debate on the 2022 budget. We have experienced heckling and near fisticuffs. And sometimes when we watch on television, people watch on television, they begin to ask questions as to whether the dialogue and the consensus burden is working in Parliament. I want your response to this. Then, 2, you mentioned e-levy and the things that it intends to do. It's very laudable policy. But will you say that government has failed to educate the populace on the importance of this levy? Because it seems the opposition is gaining grounds in convincing people to reject it, even though at the end of the day it is Parliament that will approve it. But in the public sphere, people are beginning to think that government is not being concerned to the hardship in the country. So they are coming up with this e-levy to worsen the situation. Do you think government has failed to educate the citizenry about the importance of this levy so that people will accept it? Thank you.
Thank you. Please, okay, I'll take one from the lady and then John. Okay. And then we'll take the fifth from the back.
Okay, so my name is Agnes. I report for the Chronicle. On the e-levy, the minister made us understand that it is going to be used for the construction of roads and for payments of contractors and all that. But the argument since it's mentioned has always been that if we are to pay, then it means we are being taxed double. So I want the minister to clarify or to let us know if he agrees to the fact that we should be paying double taxes. Thank you.
Yes, my name is John Awuni. I represent Kesben. Recently, His Royal Highness Otumfo made a comment regarding the e-levy. The minority has descended heavily on him. What is Honorable's comment on that? Is it part of those MPs talking on their heads, as he mentioned in his representation? And secondly, the lack of consensus that he mentioned. Some are attributing the blame on the majority leader for his posture or whatever. That is making the consensus not to happen. What is his response to that? Thank you.
Okay, so we'll take the last question from the back.
Good afternoon, Honorable. Pastor Efemi Opokumi from Kingdom FM. But my question is two different questions. But amount for Honorable Kasano. Now, Omeki reference say they need to public person IAB scanning abroso. So I say boani taxes. So amount for raise issue say abai here say TC president. So on cuts it down still now the ministers to be on my advisors to be on cuts it down. TC say your presidential advisor on health. There's some presidential advisor on HIV/AIDS. These two no. Be what I was say cuts it down. Minister who is saying on your suggestion, how does he take it? And the second question is also here. Among for raising clauses, say members of parliament, you know, also no do time be a census and the panel also be no. Now I say some creating more constituencies. So I say you cut it down MPs no more parliaments, you know. Now you cut it down cost. And now among for so raising issues say as gracia so. Sabio, a woman should in here kakra, it's an kayente so, and I say young cats in a cry out. Minister so ohun is senka kamera se.
Okay, thank you. So I will yield the podium to the Honorable Minister to respond to your questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. Joy News. You indicated that the finance minister has related to some negotiations on the e-levy. Yes, negotiations are still ongoing, and indeed, this whole brouhaha that has ensued from the budget. It had to do with 4 issues. 5 issues, I should say. 1 was the acre agreement. 2 was the Ejapa agreement. 3 was the Blekuso Keita Sea Defense. 4, the budget to Parliament. And 5, the e-levy. Since the day when the minority purportedly rejected the budget, which some of us dispute because it was an affront to the Constitution, they didn't have the numbers in the House to have done what they alleged to have done, which in the view of some of us was a nullity. Since that Friday, we've been having some serious discussions. And some of us thought that because the Right Honorable Speaker was in the chair, we should do everything to protect the integrity of the chair. Even I find that what he did was wrong. But how do you protect the integrity of the chair without bringing the chair into disrepute, even though what he did, I insist, was totally wrong? So, one, we're dealing with that. Two, the minister, the day when we walked out on that Friday, had indicated to speak to the issues before the winding up statements from the minority leader and myself as a majority leader, which request was refused by the speaker, and he threw it to the plenary. The speaker is the person charged with authority to admit questions, motions, prayers, that is, pleas, petitions, and so on. But the speaker abdicated that responsibility and said he was throwing it to the plenary, which was unheard of. But it's a yesterday matter, so let me leave that. So we have been discussing the issues that ensued, and the minister said if he had been given the opportunity, he was going to relate to these matters. One, the Kyei thing happened after the budget had been crafted. But it's a force majeure. It was something that was not anticipated that happened. But you see, dealing with the Kyei coastal menace really is a Herculean responsibility. Anybody who has gone to sea, how many of you are coasters? I at a point operated some canoes in my earlier life. I had some canoes, 4 of them, with outboard motors that I was operating from Apam, and they were going to sea. I had some contract with them. At the end of the day, they were cheating me, so I sold them. On one occasion, I entered the canoe from Shama. I wanted to see how it was. If you have been there before, you will see the waves drive you towards the east. Now, people do know that the experts will tell you that the coastal erosion at Kyei became accentuated and aggravated after the construction of the Tema Harbour, the breakwater. And that if you want to stop it, what is happening at Kyei, we need now to develop a major harbour at Kyei, which will require the construction of a breakwater that will extend long into the sea, maybe 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers. We have to stop that menace. Until we do that, it will be difficult. And I had this from the renowned engineer Professor Mausidake. He, together with a group of marine and coastal engineers, gave me this education way back in 1998. Remember in 1999, in opposition then, we had a major press conference on the Kyei Sea Defense Wall. It was the collaboration and education that I had with this that, caused me to craft that piece, which we had the press conference with. At the time, Kwame Abatelso was our spokesperson on Western Housing. So, as a nation, we need to do serious engineering studies, perhaps to review what was done, which occasioned the construction of the Kyei Sea Defense Wall. So, the minister was saying that he was going to respond to that. And as you heard him lately, he has availed 10 million cedis to review the engineering studies that happened those days to see how we can go forward on that. So the minister has responded to that. The second is the Aka energy. Indeed and in truth, the resolution that Parliament passed and how it's been captured in the budget, there's a slight discrepancy. And the minister said he was going to write the construct in the budget. The other one has to do with the JAPA. The JAPA thing is not reflected in terms of financials in the budget. The minister said he only mentioned it to enable us to know that it's still on the burner. He, when it was introduced and when the Bruha was generated, said he was going to engage in further consultations and come back to Parliament. The consultations have not been concluded. But then he put it there in the budget to let Ghanaians know that it is still on the burner. After the consultations, it will come back to Parliament. So that was the reason. For Parliament's own budget, we are still dealing with it. And it's been adjusted somewhat to take care of some other things. Now, the outstanding thing then is the e-levy. So over the weekend, we're having serious engagements on these matters into the Tuesday when we met and then voted to approve the budget. The minority's position at the time, at the very outset, was that they had zero tolerance for the e-levy, that they were not going to accommodate it at all. But then as we began the discussions and negotiations, they moved from the zero tolerance zone to a tolerance zone. And then the talk was about maybe 0.5% to accommodate it. But ultimately, they came to a point that they would agree to 1%, but not more than 1%. The minister was at the same time to also engage the operators of the system. And he succeeded in talking to them for the operators to bring their costs down by 0.25%, which means that effectively now, the total consideration of the rate, that is the operators plus the request for the ministry, has gone down by 0.25%. And the minister is still further engaged in the discourse with the stakeholders in the industry. If we are fortunate for it to climb down further, then it will affect ultimately the level of the total calculation of the rate applicable. So that is what the minister alluded to. And we are still in that. That perhaps could even happen after the passage of the estimates. If it happens that way, then all the better for all of us. If it doesn't happen, and the climb down is by 0.25, I believe that, seriously, we need money to grow the establishment. What Parliament should be demanding, my view, is that yes, we need roads. We need these infrastructure facilities. How much you anticipate to have? Maybe 8 billion, 9 billion. How much are you dedicating to the construction of roads? How much are you dedicating to the construction of educational facilities? The construction of health facilities? Let us know. So that Parliament will be able to track and trace the utilization of the monies from the e-levy. I think that should be the responsibility of Parliament as part of our oversight responsibility. But to say that physically, I will not allow you to do that, I'm not sure where that is coming from. Because when push comes to shove, we have to vote on it. And it will depend on the numbers that you have, the strength of your forces, right? But should we get to that point? I'm not sure. Let's dialogue. In my view, it is the position of any responsible opposition to critique, however strenuous it is, government policies and programs. When you have done so, and government wouldn't listen, you leave it and tell Ghanaians that I think this is not going to work, or it's not going to work the way government thinks that it's going to work. If it doesn't work, you win the day, isn't it the case? After all, you are an alternative government. If you want to be physical, to be throwing blows in Parliament, that is outrageous. That is Stone Age politics. And I don't buy into that. So we are still negotiating. I think that human as we are, the accounts have an adage. You see, right? In other words, when we sleep and we sleep well, if you sleep and sleep well, your pillow would provide some elucidation of matters that you'll be dreaming of in your sleep, and you wake up the wiser. So I think that as we go along, compromises give and take, and we'll see how it goes. But I think that we'll come to some determination on this. The other question, Joy, that you raised is about the motion for rescission. You are drawing me to Parliament, but this is Ministry for Parliamentary Affairs. I wanted to resist it, but for the import of the question, I wanted to not respond to it. Because sometimes when we are talking about Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs, people confuse Parliamentary Affairs Ministry with Parliament. The two are different. But because of the importance of this question, I would just encapsulate my response in a few sentences. The minority allegedly voted to reject the bill. The numbers were inadequate. So we said it was a nullity. Nothing has happened. With the sufficient numbers, we voted to approve of the budget. Now they are saying that they want a rescission, a motion to rescind the decision that we took. And it happened, I think, last 2 weeks. The minority leader brought a motion that he wanted us to rescind the decision to approve the budget. I raised preliminary issues that the minority leaders' motion should not be tolerated on 2 grounds. One, the motion for the approval of the budget statement and economic policy of government, which was moved by the Minister for Finance on Wednesday, the 17th of November, was what in Parliament we call a motion on notice, which is why that motion is advertised in the order paper of the day. It's a motion on notice. The Speaker has admitted it. It's advertised, and he came to move the motion. Our orders provide that if a motion is moved on notice and you want to amend that motion, you cannot come by a motion without notice. What the minority leader did was a motion without notice to arrest a motion that had come on notice. That is unacceptable. And anybody who knows our standing orders will throw it away. Which is why I asked the Speaker who was presiding at the time, the Deputy Speaker who was presiding at the time, whether he's aware of that, one. And second, assuming without admitting that that was even acceptable, a motion that is moved without notice should come with the prior approval of the Speaker. So I asked the Deputy Speaker who was presiding whether he had given prior approval to the motion that the minority leader sought to move. And he said he had been in his enclave for 1.5 hours. And the minority leader had not seen him with the motion that he was attempting to move. So it was on these 2 counts. He did not discuss it with the Speaker. The Speaker did not give prior approval to it. And that he wanted to come with a motion without notice to arrest a motion that had come on notice. And so he ruled against it. Unfortunately, they were saying that, well, what had happened earlier was at the instance of the Right Honourable Speaker. And when we overturned that decision, we also didn't have the numbers in Parliament. And the Speaker is quoted to have said that he is a member of Parliament for Kyei, and he is not the Speaker, which is true. The Constitution provides that our Speaker, Right Honorable Speaker, does not have a voting right, neither an original vote nor a casting vote. Why? Because our Speaker is not a member of Parliament. In jurisdictions where speakers are members of Parliament, they don't have original votes. Those speakers don't have original votes, but they have casting votes. Why? Because once you sit in the chair, even if you're a member of Parliament, you are supposed to be a neutral arbiter, a referee, so to speak. So you don't participate in the proceedings. When it comes to voting, you don't show your head. But you have a casting vote where there is a tie. So that's the distinction. Our Speaker is not a member of Parliament, so he doesn't have a casting vote. He doesn't have an original vote. But in jurisdictions where speakers are members of Parliament, they have casting votes. And in this case, Osei is a member of Parliament. So when the Constitution provides in Article 104 that the correct number for taking the decision should be at least 1/2 of members of Parliament in Parliament, Osei must be counted as a member of Parliament. He's a member of Parliament. So he said that he's a member of Parliament representing Kyei, but that he is not the Speaker who doesn't have a voting right. He has a voting right, except that his voting right is only at the level of casting the vote, right? Not having the original vote, but he can cast his vote when there is a tie. So that's what he alluded to. And somebody who perhaps doesn't even understand this then said, oh, if he's not the Speaker, then let me go and pull the chair. You know, very much uninitiated member of Parliament. He doesn't even understand this. That's unfortunate. And so we give the impression that we are fighting amongst ourselves, which is most unfortunate. But as I was saying, so that was the basis for the motion of rescission, which was rejected by the Speaker. Subsequent to that, because they realized that they should have come by a motion on notice, they then went and filed a motion on notice and submitted the motion to the Speaker, who again declined because he said nothing new was coming from them, from the minority. So he was not admitting it. However, it came about. That motion was then taken to the Speaker, who was outside in Dubai. And then he minuted on the motion that he has admitted it. What it meant was that at that given time, there were two speakers. I mean, and that is intolerable. It's unconscionable. We can't have two speakers presiding at the same time. Once you are not there, the deputy speaker who assumes responsibility takes full charge. And so you can't be in, outside and then try to say that you are still in charge in Ghana. I've admitted it. So, have it deliberated on. It's an unfortunate situation. And I want to believe that we'll let sleeping dogs lie. Because you see, we've moved beyond that. The reason is, my colleagues who opposed it at the very outset, now we are together in committees. We are considering the estimates. You can't put something on nothing. If the budget is rejected, why are we together considering the estimates? It means we agree that the budget has been approved. That's why we are considering the estimates. Is that not the case? So how can you come back and say that we should go back to reject the budget? To me, I think you'll be taking us back. You should allow sleeping dogs to lie. I don't think that you will want to go back. But if what I'm hearing is true, that he wants to take us back, well, the law will decide. That's all that I can say about that. GNA. MPs, the need for MPs to build dialogue and consensus. In fact, that is what we've been trying to do. And I'll tell you, And we said, somebody says that is the majority leader, Kesben. He said the majority leader who is to blame for not building consensus. I'll state it as a matter of fact. I've been minority leader for 8 years. And my 8 years as minority leader, the majority leaders who were there, none of them invited me just one day to any meeting. 8 years. The chief director and the staff of the ministry know that we have working sessions at the instance of the ministry. We've held sometimes, working dinners that I've had with my colleagues, many of them. It's never happened in the history of Parliament before. My colleagues in the opposite side, they walk to my office anytime. We dialogue. Sabi, we eat together. What else do I do? As minority leader, I never had occasion. I never had the occasion except one day that we went to Professor Mills. It had to do with when he came, he said Parliament had not approved of the Chinehesi Committee's report and that he had thrown it away. We went to him one day to discuss it, that what position he had taken was wrong. That was the only day that we succeeded in going to President Mills. President Mahama, a former member of Parliament, not once did he invite the leadership of Parliament to his office to have any discourse. Akufo-Addo, at my instance, has had meetings with the leadership, collective leadership of Parliament. On at least 3 occasions, we've been at dinner with him. And who is saying that we are not building consensus? Please, it's not true. We do this, but you see, the problem is, like this matter that came before us when the president suggested that we should work to elect the MMDCs. In Parliament, with the leaders, we had agreed. And we had gone to seal it at Kempiski. And then we left. And the following day, their party came in and said, no, you don't like it. They should not be part of it. And that was it. It's really who is in control of my colleagues on the other side. And I think the party in Parliament should be liberated to lead. But some people behind trying to pull strings. That's the difficulty. And it makes the work very difficult. Because we had agreed, this e-levy, we had agreed, they had moved, with respect to my colleagues, from 0 tolerance to 1%. That, we agree to 1%. After we had agreed, the following day the party had and somebody pretending to be talking for the party said the position of the party was that they would not agree to any percentage of the e-levy. So where do we go? Did we go or did we come, as some people would say? So you see, it's their own inconsistency. It's not me, it's not the leadership. Because what we have done, none of them has ever done that before. But we're still learning. So, government failing to educate on the e-levy. We in Parliament, we have been doing our best. The rest, the Minister of Information is here. I will not speak for them. They will cry their own cry. If they are not helping to educate the people, they should explain. But I think they are also doing their best. The Minister of Information, the minister is part of us. And he knows where we are. And I know the party itself has its own communication outfit. But the ministry as the communication outfit for government really has done their best under very difficult circumstances. But I think, as I said, we see this vacillation. But to me, that 1% is even mentioned along the way. It's suggestive that something good would still emerge. Chronicle, the issue about double taxation, whether it amounts to double taxation. You work for Chronicle. You are remunerated. You receive pay. Right? And taxes are deducted. Right? Opposite. You go to buy items. You pay VAT. Is that double taxation? They don't pay VAT. If that's sort of, they don't pay VAT. So what is being advocated really is giving a dog a bad name to hang it. As simple as that. It's giving a dog a bad name to hang it. In any event, as the minister has said, if there's any element relating to that, let's sit down, let's brainstorm to cure that mischief. But I'm interested, so I was a I'm interested. I don't know, double taxation, he now who was with me. I don't know. How do we move forward as a nation? How do we move forward as a nation? So let's be transparent to each other, because we all want the best for this country, right? So I think that we can work to. And then, Kesben, you were saying to me that the position expressed by Otumfuo, the minority has descended on him. I don't know whether it's good or bad, but the press, the media houses, they engage me so much on a daily basis. You know, when they call and I talk to them, I don't listen. I don't listen back. I make the points. If somebody who doesn't understand who want to attack me, I leave it. I leave it to the judgment of the good people of this country. So I don't make it a habit of listening to various radio stations. Occasionally, you have people sending snippets of what they might have heard, with some assets that somebody might have thrown at me. When they come to me with those matters, I don't even listen. Why? Who it is who would want to witness a bad thing? I mean, somebody has vomited, and somebody comes to pull you out. Oh, somebody has vomited. Let's go and see. Would you go and see? So, I make my points. If you want to engage me intellectually on that point, let's engage. But you pour insults on the person. Look, I keep saying, in any discourse, in any argument, in any debate, whoever throws the first punch will be argument and a debate. He is incapable of thinking. So let's end the debate by throwing a punch. I don't engage in that kind of thing. Let's engage intellectually. Kingdom, you said increasing the number of members of parliament, we should look at it. That we need money, but we should also look at our expenditures. I agree with you. We should look at our expenditures. And that's why I talk about transparency and accountability. And I'm also saying that even the e-levy, by God's grace, if we have it, I'm part of the government, but it should be part of the responsibility of Parliament to demand that, yes, we have come through fire to achieve this. Minister, that is transparency and accountability. And if people get to know what you are doing with your money, and they believe in what you are doing, that ultimately it will yield some good for the country, they will pay. Don't forget, in 2009, President Mills, when he came, he increased road tolls by 900%. People were raising issues, right? From 5 pesos to 50 to 5 cedis, the base, and then from 10 pesos to 1 cedi, right? People would raise issues. But the man waited 1 month after the introduction of the law. Then in Accra, we saw spot improvement on roads. And then people began to say, if people begin to see that the money that you are collecting, you are putting it to good use, they will not complain. But if they can't see what you are doing with it, if there's nothing material to show, then they will raise issues. So I think I agree with you that we need to force government to come out clearly, to be much more accountable to the people in terms of our expenditures. I also agree with you that, and I've been talking to this several times, that I don't agree with this principle of increasing the number of seats every 10 years. It's unsustainable. It's unsustainable. So at the last count, when it happened under the NDC, when they increased the number by 45, from 230 to 275, I raised issues. I was a minority leader then, and I told them, don't think that you are the most ingenious people. Now you are doing some some disingenuous involvement in trying to redraw constituency boundaries to give yourself some advantage. When we finished into that next election, the additional constituencies that were created, then people say, oh, but we didn't get too much. I think we had 23, the NDC had 22 of the additional 45 that were created. So it was like, oh, I didn't know what kind of class. On the face value, you would think that they were right. They were not right. Because all those constituencies that were divided up, about 80% already were in the hands of the MPP. And when they did the division, then some went to them. That's how you should look at it. And I don't think that's the way to go. I think that perhaps we should go back to the original 200 seats. Don't forget, look at the Constitution. Until the Fourth Republic, this country was divided up into 140 constituencies. It was just before the elections that additional 60 constituencies were created to increase the number to 200. That was in 1992. Then Kufuor's time, it got increased by 30. Then another NDC by 45. So under the NDC, PNDC, it's increased by 105. Under MPP by 30. So if you want to equalize, then one will say that let's add 75. And then we'll see where the NDC will be. But is that a way to grow our democracy? I don't think so. I don't think so. There's no democracy that I know anywhere that every 10 years you are increasing the number of seats in the system. I don't think so. We should establish a ceiling in the Constitution. And it should be part of the review of the Constitution that we shouldn't go beyond, let's say, 200. I think that 200 should be the optimum for us as a nation. Ghana is a small state. You see, Afarijan, when he was summoned to the Supreme Court to define for us what the population quota of this nation was not able to talk to it. It's the population quota that changes, not the number of seats. So if we say that we are 200 constituencies in this country, now the population is about 31 million, right? What it means is that if you are going by population quota and the number is 200, just divide 200, the 31 million by 200. And we're going to get something in the region of about 155,000 or so per constituency. But it is not possible to have all the constituencies having 155,000 or so. What it means is that because some constituencies are sparsely populated, that is why usually the commissions will give a band $155,000, maybe up to 200,000, you have one constituency. Maybe the floor would be about 120,000. If you don't have 120,000, if you have 200,000, the remaining will spill into the contiguous constituency. If you have less than 200, you don't qualify, right? You still have that constituency. So that at any given time, regardless of the size of the population, we still have our 200 constituencies. The number of constituencies should not be increasing. And so I agree with you that we should disallow that. And that has been my consistent position. And then finally, you spoke about gratuity and ex gratia, that we should do away with it. My husband said, "One to America." That time, I flew to America, and also me entitled to back pay. What did back pay in I was that you forgo my back pay. I said, "Well, you can't have." The truth of the matter is, this whole gratuity is because today I'm a member of parliament for this 8th parliament, but my emolument has not been established by any committee. So you know what usually happens, and I'm saying the presidents are very sensitive, because if you are a president and you bring this immediately, the day after you are swearing in, this man is a self-seeker. He's sworn in today, and tomorrow, and the next day is setting up a committee to look at his salary. Meanwhile, you have agitations from the labor unions who want to satisfy them first. And when you finish, the next budget is coming. You have to deal with them. So eternally, you are into disputations with organized labor and other people, employees and employers. So government will want to see when the turbulence has stabilized a bit, and then the committee is established. So when the committee is established, by the time they finish their work, it's in the 3rd year or perhaps 4th year of that president, right? And so when they have established the levels of emolument, you would see that I am entitled, the member of parliament is entitled to some arrears. The gratuity aspect is just a small portion. It's just a small portion. It's the arrears that add up. And then maybe a member is receiving 300,000 Ghana cedis, 400,000 Ghana cedis, and people are worrying, hey, I know, yeah, 4 years, I give 400,000. Oh, Mr. Say, you said my money to Annika. You will not ask. So, colleagues, that is my take on it. We should work to have, some of us think that even that aspect of Article 71, it should not be ritualistic, such that every 4 years a new committee has to be established. And President Akufo-Addo believes in that we should set up one committee and then perhaps amend the constitution such that the recommendations of that committee will have built into it some automatic mechanisms which will be triggered after a new president or a new parliament assumes office, based on agreed upon indices, maybe some inflation, currency depreciation, interest rate, or whatever, so that the succeeding president doesn't have to suffer the same thing. In that case, right from day one, the succeeding president, the succeeding members of parliament, the succeeding speaker, the succeeding vice president, the succeeding ministers, right from day one would know their emoluments. And this brouhaha would cease. Madam Moderator, I heard you say that this is first tranche. But I'll plead with you, like Jesus said on the cross, let this cup pass me by.
Once again, I want to thank the Honorable Minister and the Chief Director, Directors and staff of the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs, and also thank our very own Madam Patricia Dovi-Sampson, who is the FNA Director here at the Ministry of Information, government spokespersons, and distinguished guests who have joined us this afternoon for this very important exercise. Our friends, thank you for the coverage, and we believe you will spread the good news. And by the grace of God, everything about the e-levy and Parliament and all the issues that have come up today, which the Honorable Minister has addressed, will be resolved, and you assist us in that direction. Thank you and good afternoon.